Hotep, greetings. And it's Tanku Chihantamo. Greetings and thank you for joining us today as we launch our podcast. Before we get started, I would like for us to pay homage to the lives lost this year due to COVID, as well as the trauma related to racial and cultural and social injustices, especially the unrest in Black and Brown communities. I also would like us to recognize the land of Indigenous people, many of whom lost their lives to genocide and were forced to leave their land. The land held by ICE, Apalachee, Calusa, Timucua, Tobago tribes, the Seminole tribes of Florida, and the Miku, Suki tribes of Indian here in Florida. I am extremely excited about the video podcast we are launching today, Matters of Diversity with Dr. B. I'm equally excited about having my first guest be President Alexander Cartwright. Those on the podcast know that President Cartwright has come to us this year in the midst of a pandemic, multiple pandemics as it were. Though through it all, he has hit the ground running and has not looked back since day one. I'm excited about his leadership. So a little bit about Matters of Diversity. I had an idea a few months ago, back on a platform that we can use here at UCF that would inform us about things that are happening on this campus as they relate to equity, inclusion, and diversity, whether it be administrators, faculty, staff, students, or community stakeholders. As I shared, the podcast will be an opportunity to genuinely engage in fireside chats, perhaps difficult dialogues surrounding equity and inclusion. We will be airing the podcast live twice weekly. Wednesdays will be dedicated to administrative side of the house, as well as stakeholders from the Orlando community and beyond. Friday's shows will be dedicated solely to our UCF students. So without any further ado, I will invite in UCF's leader, President Alexander Cartwright, who will be bringing and joining us also during this time. Perhaps his wife may show up. President Cartwright is UCF's sixth president. He came to us from his role as chancellor at the University of Missouri. He is a native of the Bahamas. So please, let's get at it, President Cartwright. Greetings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Butler. It's great to be here.
Great to see you. So let's get started. One of the things that you have talked about and some of the things that you have put out to the university is about love and compassion. And I loved it. The minute I saw that, I was like, yes, that's kind of who I am, right? I want to put myself out there and I want to kind of let the people know that, if I could be vulnerable with you and share with you what I have going on, I can also maybe invite you in and let you know that we're in this together, right? There's some kinship, right? The theme for this week is United, Connected Family. So can you talk a little bit about love and compassion?
It's what drives all of us, right? It's having that support, having people around you who believe in you and will always be there for you, even during the worst of times, right? And right now it's really difficult. There's a lot of people hurting for many reasons, right? I mean, like you said, it's multiple pandemics in different ways. And to get through that, you need to know that there's others who care about you, that care about who you are as a person, that is there to help you. Sometimes, people look at that and think, well, love and compassion is no way to run a business or run a university. I think it's exactly the opposite. I think people want to be part of an institution where they know they're valued, where we care about them, and that we make decisions based on that, right? That I'm hoping that people recognize that all of our decisions are going to be driven by that principle, and that we want everybody here to feel that they're in a place where you are loved, and that where our compassion will drive the decisions we make.
So how did that come to you? I know that you, I think about it in terms of the Caribbean side of yourself. that love and compassion, that want to be there for everyone and welcoming. And, I know that every time I've ever visited the Bahamas, it's always been one of those places where, everybody just wraps their arms around you. So is that a part of who you've become?
When I think about how we end up here with love and compassion, it has more to do with what type of leader, what is the environment that I would want to be in to be effective, right? And I can tell you that I do so much better when I feel that I'm being supported, when I feel that love, when I feel that compassion. And yeah, I mean, part of that certainly comes from the Bahamas, and comes from my growing up, right? Is that I had a mom who, I grew up with a single mom when my dad left us when I was in third grade. And, my mom was the one who was the strength in my life. And she was the one who took care of all of us, right? There were three of us, my brother and my sister and me, and I was the youngest. And, my brother had to start working when he was 14 to try to take care of us. And she was the one who kept it all together. And throughout all of that, we always knew that she cared about us, loved us, and I would say had this belief in us that if anyone could feel that there's someone in their lives that feel that type of belief in your ability, I would say that.
Oh, it's the mom.
That
Yeah.
go a long ways to have that, and I mean that is that she never saw that that there were things we couldn't accomplish, and she was always there, trying to help us.
So, there's something to be said about someone who is really going to pay homage to their parents and their ancestors, so to speak, because you shared in your story that you started off from meager means, right? And you had the drive to kind of move forward and get to the space where you are today. And so maybe kind of chronicle some of that. What was that like for you to get to the United States and then ultimately be the president of UCF?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when my dad left, we didn't have a lot, right? Like I said, my brother started working when he was 14. He had to drop out of school. And my sister, she dropped out of school in 9th grade, I think it was. And I was the youngest, and I was the one who had some opportunity. And because of them, I was able to at least stay in the school systems, and they weren't great school systems, right? I mean, the Bahamas was becoming an independent country. And so in 1973, I still remember the song, right? Independence morning is like a baby born.
You going to sing it for us?
No, I can't sing it. I could sing it, but it is, it's like a baby born. And it was all about how the country was becoming a new place. And the schools didn't have, there was a lot of public schools. There weren't, even right before that in the 60s, there weren't many schools for people to go to, especially, if you didn't have any means. There were just one or two schools that were sort of, there was government high school, I think is what it was called. That was like, if you were lucky enough to get to go to that high school, that's the high school that people went to. Most people didn't get to go to high school. And so when it became a independent country, then by that time there were more high schools, and middle schools, but there was no, the infrastructure wasn't there yet. The schools didn't have enough teachers. They didn't have math, some of the math teachers, some of the science teachers. And so I ended up, when my dad left, I ended up having to go to public public schools. And you know, it was a little, yeah, we didn't have much, right? And I think I might have shared this with you, you know, is that
Yeah. That you were actually a minority living in Bahamas before coming to the U.S. Yeah.
Yeah, when I first moved, when my sister and I first started going to San Luis Primary School, we were the first white kids to go there. And you know, it was, as I tell people, there's a number of things that I give thanks for in my life, and that's one of them, right? Is that at the time it may not have felt like that, but what it did for me is it put me in a position where, you know, I was able to uh, be with, uh, um, with everybody else in the Bahamas, and really to understand the lives of everybody else in the Bahamas. Um, and you know, we'd never had a lot, even when my dad was taking care of us, but then it became even worse. And so but that experience is invaluable, because I learned so much from that, right? And then continuing to be in those schools, I just learned so much about people, and um, caring about people, and understanding, like I like to say, you know, people are people, and there's great people everywhere. And there are people who cared deeply about you, the teachers, you know, all the teachers that helped me. Um, and they did see, you know, they always made me feel like I had some ability, even though they didn't have the resources to teach it. They always made me feel like, you
Right.
know, that they had
That's a resiliency thing.
it is a resiliency thing. It does help. And so that, you know, going through that experience, coupled with the fact of having my mom have to take care of us, and my older brother having to work to help to support us, um, I'm always appreciative of everything that I've gotten in life. And I give them so much credit for enabling that, right? Is I certainly wouldn't be here without them.
And I wonder what that's like, because up until my adulthood, my mother and father were together until my mother passed away. And so I wonder what that was like for you to be in a single household without your father. Do you feel as though that sparked you to want to do better? Or, you know, or do you see that, you know, you could have been more, I don't know, stronger in your own um, ability to move forward had he been more instrumental in your life?
You know, I don't know. I actually have no way to know what the outcome would be of that experiment. You know, he was in and out of my life at times, and but what I would say is that, you know, I didn't have that strong, other than my brother. Right, my brother was my male. My brother's 7 years older than me, so he was
Okay.
really my strong, you
He was
know,
your role model.
role model. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he was. And so he and my uncle was only, my mom's brother was only 2 years older than my brother. So
Okay.
yeah, so we all lived together for a while. So he was basically like he was like a brother to us. So they were sort of the role models that I had. But what I'd say, you know, is um, my mom was this. Uh, I tell people all the time, you know, she was probably the smartest person I've ever met. Honestly, she is incredibly bright. She has dementia now, but you can still see the brilliance in her at times when she says stuff. Um, and she, you know, she probably was on the lenient side, is what I would say, and she let us get away with a lot of stuff.
I
Um,
won't ask you what the worst thing you got away with.
no, don't ask me. But she did, and I think, you know, her ability and what I learned from her and how much I respected her helped me tremendously when I started to get serious about school and doing the things when I came over to go to school here. But I also think, you know, that that ability to just let people take chances and not worry about stuff, and and a little bit of risk taking, and that it was okay, right, to explore. And I mean, these are valuable lessons that are hard to teach.
Right.
Right? When you think about innovation, when you think about what you're trying to do, those are hard to teach. And when you have a parent who allows you to get away with some of those things, I think it helps you because you're always willing to take those chances. But yeah, it's those things that certainly have shaped me when I came over to this country. And my brother visited. I'll say one last thing, is that my brother reminded me, of some things when he visited me last December. I haven't been able to see him even since I've been here, even though he's now in Tampa, because of where he's working, and
Uh-huh.
my mom's with us, so we have to try to keep her healthy.
Yeah.
I remember him talking. He was telling me. He said, "Remember when we had these oranges, right?" And I remember us when we were growing up. And that sounds silly that I'm talking about oranges, right? But I remember he's talking. I said, "Remember we had these oranges?" And I was like, yeah, I do remember us having oranges. This was like one time, a few times we had oranges. I was like, where were this? Because he was older than me. And that he reminded me, that what they were was that someone that we knew brought them to us, but he brought them from the dump because people had dumped them. And so we were able to then get oranges because someone took them out of the garbage. Yeah, so that's, when you have that type of life that you live, it makes you think completely different about where things are.
Yeah. I can imagine, how you see others. And that's such a rich part of, I think, who we are as human beings, right? It's
Yeah.
like your story doesn't get connected to someone else's story until we have the opportunity to have a dialogue and talk about those things, right? Because I can see you lofty and sitting up on the throne and being the president, but if I don't know the backstory, right, and if people don't know the backstory, then it becomes really, really one of those things where you're like, well, they got all these privileges, they got all these things, right? Because there are things that people want to think about other people, because the narrative sometimes, especially here, I think in the United States, is that if you've been successful here, you've had a leg up. And I think your story is one of the powerful ones, is that you come from another place to the United States and are able to achieve. And I think that is something that can be said with most people who have disadvantages in their life as they're growing up.
Yeah, but I also recognize, how lucky I was, right?
Okay, talk about that.
I agree. I mean, I think that, coming from that, and I still remember, you said something that's really interesting, right? You said, here's the president and you're, a leader and all of this and it's lofty and everything. And when I think about that, I never really think of myself that way, right? As I'm pretty grounded about who I am and where I came from. And I know all my weaknesses, and I understand, maybe not all, I know many of them. And I understand, the privileges I've had,
Right.
luck that I've had when I came over to this country, right? Is that I got lucky in so many ways, and not everybody gets lucky.
Mm.
Not everybody gets those opportunities, and there are a lot of people who those opportunities are basically shut off to those people, right, for various reasons. And I was lucky in that when I came over, I was able to go to a community college. I got a job. My first job in the U.S. was cleaning hog confinement buildings, and then it's quite a messy job, and the pressure washer. So you can imagine, just have that.
You have a hazmat suit on?
No, there was none.
They didn't provide that for you?
No, it was just on you. And then I was so happy when I got a job at a Stuckey's, which is like this is
Supermarket, right?
long time ago. It was like I don't know what they call them here. I don't even actually know what they call them. It's like a
Grocery store?
convenience store with gas, gas.
Yeah, convenience store, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's what. And then I finally got a job as a custodian at a factory. Um, and that's when I finally was able to start making enough money to start taking the classes and doing the things that I wanted to do. But again, I knew that I got lucky, right? Because I had that job and there was someone at the job, my manager, her husband worked at that factory, right? And he said, there's I know you work hard. It's a fact. There's a job over there, right? And I was like, I'll take any job. Does it pay more? I'll take it, right? I went over and started doing that, and that actually led us into to where we are. And then along the way, a lot of things broke my way. So yeah, interesting.
So once you got through your schooling, did you see yourself going to be a chancellor or going to be a president of a university? Was that in your line of vision?
No, no, not at all. In fact, when I first, started school, my goal was really to try to get a degree, right? And I was going to be an accountant. I was going to follow accounting because it was the only thing I really knew from the Bahamas, right? Is the Bahamas has a lot of banking and other things, and so I knew you could be an accountant and you could actually make an okay living. And so I was just planning on getting a degree and going out and working. And even when I switched to engineering, I had planned on just getting a job, right? Because with a bachelor's degree.
Right.
I spent a summer at GE Medical Systems in one of their programs, and I started to finally. That was when I was in my end of my junior year in engineering. I was already pretty old by then, but the in that experience made me realize that I wanted something more than just being in an industry job where I was just doing stuff that people were telling me what to do.
Okay.
And so then when I went back, number of professors were telling me, you should really go to graduate school, right? And that's what I mean when I got lucky. I had people who said to me, you should do these things, right? And so I went to graduate school, and then eventually got my PhD. And then I did want to teach, but I wanted to teach. I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to do research, but I had no plans of being an administrator. I couldn't see that far ahead.
It's really interesting because you talk about that, and I think that mentorship is really a part of how we become who we are, right? Somebody sees something in you and says, you know what, you need to take yourself away from where you are right now and think about this place over here. I can see you in that location. That happened for me as well in terms of that, right? I had never thought that I would be a college professor, but each stage of my life was like, wow, I can see myself doing so much more with the people that I want to do the work for if I'm at this level.
Yes.
And that's kind of how I moved forward with regards to getting into this kind of academic position.
And that's exactly it. If you think forward to becoming a chancellor or a president, it was just realizing that I could do even more.
Right.
I could have a bigger impact. I could pay back in some way for all the luck and all the benefits I've received and been able to, the way that we've been able to live. I would, my hope is that we're able to provide that opportunity to everyone, and it's what's so fascinating to me about UCF, right? Is that we have that opportunity here. We have so many incredible students, and we just need to figure out ways to help them to achieve their dreams and be who they can be.
So is there anything about your journey that you would change? Or would you live each moment the way that it has gotten you to this space right now?
I look back and, you'd always say, well, it would have been a little easier if we had this or that. And actually, I wouldn't change it. I would not change it. I think it's those experiences, the lived experiences that you have is really defines who you are, and gives you a perspective. And if you feel good about that perspective at the end, and you feel good about what's happening, I think there's no reason to want to change that, right? If throughout elementary and middle and even high school, we call it junior high there, and then high school.
Me too. I was junior high.
Junior high, and then high school. I had only had I had one white teacher in sixth and seventh grade, and then I didn't see another one until there was a little transfer that I did to another school, and I saw one there, if I'm remembering right. But I really hadn't seen, anyone that really looked like me.
You bring something up for me. So thinking about UCF and thinking about the number of students who come from very different communities, right? Who are going through our courses and seeing professors standing before them who don't look like them, you kind of have a sense of what that's like. And so what can we, and what do you want to do at UCF that changes the narrative of how we represent our student population?
We have to continue to I've said this before, right? Is that I believe that this institution looks like the future of America when you look at our student body. Certainly it does. But we need to become the future of America. And we need to be that institution that does it better and differently than other institutions. And as part of that, we need to be thinking about how we continue to diversify our faculty and our staff, and how because it is important. It's interesting at the same time that I say, I didn't see them, but it was also incredibly valuable too, that I had so many different figures of authority,
right,
in my life. And it helps me now that when I'm thinking about people, I always see that they can be that leader that can transform someone else's life, right? And our job is to give them an opportunity to do that. So
thinking about respect, those people who are there for you to lead you on. If you respect them, you do so because you first of all, you're honoring them because they're an elder to you or whomever, but at the same time,
So I think if we can continue to think about how we diversify, some of the things that we're doing across some of our different consortia, where we're talking about how do we help each other to encourage our students to go on to graduate school, especially from underrepresented groups, so that they continue to look. We have so many students that have the ability that they could get their PhDs, right? We need to be the institutions encouraging them to go on, become get the PhDs, become whatever they want to do, whatever degree they want to do, whatever terminal degree, because those terminal degrees are then what allows them to come back and be professors at this institution and at other institutions. And we need to help with that, because there's a need for us to continue to diversify the country, to diversify our faculty and our staff at universities, because I think it's going to make all of us stronger and certainly make this institution a better place for all of our amazing students.
So I have heard you say that, and so how do you kind of get to the naysayers, right? The ones who don't necessarily follow your vision or feel that your vision is a good one to follow. How do you get to them as a leader of the university?
I've always been one that if I believe deeply in something, I continue to push it forward, right? And I'm hoping you always have to go with the people who you have to hope that you can reach enough of the people who have that shared vision, and that we create a culture, we create an environment where people believe in that vision, right? And what happens is, if you can create the right type of culture, right? We know this from the negative part, right? If you create bad cultures, people want to leave immediately, right? They want to get out of there and do something else. But if you can create the great culture where people can excel, then you can attract people to the institution. And my vision is that when you start setting up, this is our expectation, right? Our expectation is that you're going to value people, and then the minimum, we're going to welcome people to this place. But really, welcoming is the minimum that we should be doing. We should be celebrating people and celebrating what they bring. And that, if we can do that, then those naysayers and others, they're not going to be comfortable here, right? They're not going to be part of an institution that believes in things that they doesn't align with what they might believe in. And maybe it is best that they leave, right? And that's okay, because we want to have an environment where we're all like, hey, this is what we're striving for. This is who we're going to become. This is what it means to be at UCF. And we need to continue to push and just keep staying singularly focused on, this is who we're going to be.
Yeah. So how do we do that with an executive order that comes down on a university or just a state or anyone that says to you that you can't necessarily live by those values? That by living by those values, you're actually doing some type of reverse discrimination, or you're tackling people who also have a right. Right. So how do you kind of balance the fact that you're here for all people and being inclusive, right? Because I think about the climate survey we gave, and the fact that people were saying, I don't feel like I belong here, and I don't feel like people are valuing me. And then we then turn it and see that there are people who are here who are like, yes, I am a part of that problem that you stated, right? I'm the one who didn't let you come in through the search process. I'm the one who didn't value your research and didn't put you forth in tenure and promotion. I'm the one who looked at you when you gave me a paper and said that, this couldn't have come from you. You must have plagiarized. So those messages are being said to people who live on the margins, so to speak. And then they're the ones who are being pushed out. So how do we change that narrative, or have a conversation and I guess an objective to make sure that everybody kind of abides by that?
Everything that I do, I go from a viewpoint of respect for everybody within the institution, and also a commitment that our job as educators is that we're going to advance knowledge, but we're also going to advance certainly the people that are here. We're going to try to help them to become the best that they can be.
Right.
And when I think that way, then there's so many things that we could be doing for all of our staff. Heard a lot about professional development, mentoring, all of the things that we can be doing. These are all things that benefit so many people, right? And when we think about our differences, there truly is excellence from difference, right? When you think about
that, because I think we hear that a lot, right? And people are like, so you hear, we really are better when we're more diverse, and diversity gives us this. From your perspective, what does that mean?
Yeah, so there are some people who will you have to give them the economic argument, right? Mm-hmm. So the economic argument, if you look at McKinsey, which is a consulting firm, they did a study in 2015 or 2016. The name of it was Diversity Matters. And what they showed was that companies that were gender diverse were 15% more productive than companies that were not. And they also showed that companies that were diverse in every sense of the word were about 35% more productive. And so there is an economic reason right there, right? And then if you think about solving grand challenges in society, it's not helpful to get into a room that everybody in the room has the same background, was trained at the same institutions, learned in the same way. You know, they're all going to end up with the same solution, right? Thinking that that's the only way to do it. What you need is you need people who've had different lived experiences, different backgrounds, have them come together, and then the beauty of all of those experiences, all of who they are, comes to the forefront. And if you have that environment, then that drives and makes the decision much better for everybody.
Right. So Dr. Tolson talked about that today during his keynote with regards to having different voices at the table. He talked about it in regards to HBCUs. And sometimes when we're looking to hire people, we say, we're not going to hire somebody from this particular university because they're not part of the chosen few, right? And so can you talk a little bit about what do you think it's like for people like me, right? Who might be in spaces where I'm the only person who's representing maybe a certain culture or a certain intersectionality or something along those lines, but haven't had the opportunity, right? Haven't, you think about first generation students.
Yeah.
And in many cases, I think that people who are going into leadership, if they haven't had somebody before them, they're first generation, right? And so going into a boardroom, so to speak, or going to into a professorship or any type of a leadership position, many times you haven't seen or have been mentored by people who have been able to bring you there. So what is the role of someone who's already at the table when these types of opportunities open for folks?
So I will actually try to give I'll try to think through that in terms of how I think. I'll try to explain how I think. Anytime you have a healthy environment where you have people at the table, it isn't your job to feel like you should be doing anything, specifically, but it's rather the other people who should be helping to draw that out and get information and learn, right? So we should have an environment where you feel comfortable bringing up things that are important to you, that's your perspective, what has happened, why a particular decision that we make may have an impact on people because of the experiences they've had, right? We need an environment where people feel okay with doing that. And that's on the leader, right? Is if you're, as a leader, if you shut people down and you don't allow them to say what they feel and you just want them to follow whatever you say, you'll never get the right answers. And so as much as I think, you need to be there and you need to help, but it's also on everybody else that's in the room. Right? Because you can't do it all. And you need people who are willing to, but you do need people to listen. And you do need a space where you can talk about things. And we need to think about how we have those conversations. And I know it's really hard to have some of those conversations about differences, right? Race or anything. I mean, those are difficult conversations to have for lots of people because they don't even know how to start them.
So do you think the pandemic or the things that are happening in Black and Brown communities changed you over this past year?
Yes, right? In that I've always recognized all the challenges. I've recognized what we should be trying to do, but I think it's also created an opportunity for us to say, okay, we have lots of people who now recognize the same problem, right? And how do we all come together now and make change happen and commit to that? the more you watch what's happened, the killings. I mean, all the things that have happened, and um, that isn't the result, of course, of the pandemic, but I think it's the fact that all these things were going on, and now it's much more visible. These have been happening, right? We know they've been happening, and now it's more visible. And so now, how do we work together? I do wish that we could figure out ways where we can get to a place where we recognize that, as people of this world, right, that part of our mission should be not just how we make it better for us individually, but rather how do we make it better for everybody around us.
Right.
And at the end of the day, do I feel like we made a difference in that I've helped somebody else to be able to do a little bit more and achieve a little bit more and reach more of their potential?
Mhm.
That's what we should be concentrated on. I think we have a lot of work to do,
Yeah.
and I'm not gonna say that it's easy work. It's hard work, but you have to be committed.
Yeah, I think the commitment's different too, right? And so committed, and give yourself grace to make mistakes.
Yes, and we will all make mistakes.
That's the one thing that's happening with so many people. It's like, I don't know what to say to you. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. And so there are a lot of people who know that or recognize that people are hurting, but at the same time, because they don't want to say the right thing or the wrong thing, they kind of stop themselves and they fall short, and then that doesn't help with their belonging, and they don't see how that matters in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, that's interesting you should say it that way. Yeah, I mean, I think it's again creating that space for everybody, right? Where you're and by the way, I've heard this now from so many people here at UCF, that there's a willingness that and a recognition that people want to learn, they want to understand, they want to do better, right, in how they interact, but that they don't know quite how to do it and they don't know how to talk about it. But I've also heard you, and I've heard a lot of people say, I'm willing to help you with that,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
so it is this making a mistake, right? And I think, maybe at UCF, I don't know if we've had if someone has given us a good toolkit to do this, right? Maybe we need like some
It's life. The
key
toolkit.
words. Well, key words that we can say, um, you know, uh, uh, I don't know how to say it other than this, but I declare ignorance right now. So let's have a very frank conversation, right? And help me.
So you know what? Let me say, as a Black instructor, I will tell you this, right? If I already go into the space recognizing that there are some deficits and that people are going to make mistakes, and I tell you that it's okay for you to make that mistake, then if you don't take me up on that, then
Yeah.
shame on you, right? Because the fact of the matter is this: I do want people to find out for themselves, right? I've had so many people since this pandemic has started, or especially since the killing of George Floyd, who have said, I want you to teach me. And I'm like, I spent years in the classroom trying to teach people about diversity and inclusion and all this other stuff, and they wouldn't hear me, right? And so all of a sudden they see they see it now, right? And I'm like, I'm tired. I mean, and the exhaustion is invigorating at the same time. But I said, my response now has been, you have to go through the fire, just like I have gone through the fire every single day. And you need to be able to feel this, and you need to be able to make a decision as to what it is, right? You need to be able to, if you fell and broke your leg, you would know what to do.
That's what I was going to say. The challenge is, how do we get people to have some experience that they could relate in some way, right? And it's hard though, right? Because you don't know what it means to walk. I don't know what it means for you to walk down the street.
Right.
I don't, right? I have not lived that. So how do I then relate to that, right? How do I figure out what that might feel like and the challenges and other things that it might create.
Right. And so the funny part about that is somebody will respond with that. And it's like I say, I was driving down the street and I got pulled over by the cop. And then somebody say, well, I got pulled over by a cop too. It's like, wait.
Uh-huh.
You're missing the whole point here.
Exactly.
The point of me being pulled over by a cop has a whole total different vibe than what might happen for you. And so I need you to recognize that and sit with me with that, right? And I'll sit with you as you go through the pain too. But the whole fact of the matter is, if we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable in other people's spaces as well, right? So I got to be the person that, no, nothing's wrong with me, everything is fine. And so I can't tell you that I have to kind of one up you or say that I've gone through the same thing, as opposed to sitting in the conversation with me and recognizing what that meant when I got pulled over.
Yeah, what I was trying to say is it helps, and this is just from the way we learn, right? Is that if there's something that I can connect in my mind in some way, I don't mean exactly the same thing, but to try to understand at some level, I think that's important. Your comments actually, and your question about this made me think of, when I was in graduate school, right? I was very, actually in undergrad and graduate, but mostly in graduate, right? It's so fortunate to work with a number of students from, and postdocs and faculty from other countries, right? And when you're a graduate student, along with people from other countries, you're willing to learn from each other. And we would have those conversations, right? You'd ask, just because they knew you didn't know anything about, which hand to use, what to do. There's a lot of things you have to learn from each other. And you're able to have much better conversations about their experiences, and people will be pretty open with you about it, right? And
it's really interesting, because it's almost like I'll travel to Europe and I'll go to Greece or I'll go to Australia, and I'm like, oh, the culture is so phenomenal there.
Yeah.
And I could take all these artifacts back to my home in the United States and not recognize that the people around you in your own community, or maybe outside of your community, depending on where you live, is part of that culture too.
That's my point, is that what you have to have is a great appreciation for the lived experiences that people have had, right? And to ask them about it, right? Is that, I still, I still look back to all of the experiences in the Bahamas. It's very similar in a lot of ways to some places here. And I feel very comfortable in that environment, right? Because that's my home, right? That's where I grew up very early in my life. And I think that's, so I'm always inquisitive about people's experiences, where they grew up, because I know how much it shapes. And if you tell me a lot about where you grew up, and then I start to realize too, how much you understand of your own experiences. And when you appreciate your own experiences, then I think you're able to recognize too other people's experiences and how they may differ.
Right.
And that's important, because we need to see that we've all had these different experiences, and those experiences are shaped by how we look or who we love or anything. You would not like, you don't want them to be shaped by those things, but they are.
Right. So there's a question in the Q&A, and if anybody wants to add anything, we only have about 9 more minutes, but in the Q&A, how do you manage issues of free speech, especially when students feel like they are being negatively faced with objectionable comments or actions?
Yeah, this is always a difficult topic, right? Because we believe in freedom of speech. We believe in people being able to express their opinions. We don't have to believe what they say.
Right.
I know it's hard to say that, right? And we don't have, they're still allowed. People are still allowed. As a public institution, everybody's still allowed to come on this campus and voice their opinions, and
Right.
and we have to we have to allow it. We have to enable them to be here because it is a public institution. We don't have, one thing, as hard as it is if there are negative things and things that you don't believe in, as long as it doesn't, cross the line into things we will not accept, right? Those, then what we have to do is figure out ways that, we keep telling ourselves, making sure we know that this isn't who we are. It isn't what we believe. And I know it can impact a lot of people, and that's the problem, right? That's the real challenge, is how much it impacts. Words can hurt.
Yeah.
Word in a big way, and they can hurt you in so many ways, and they're painful. But I always try to think through it, and my mom used to have a saying, right, is that, she used to tell us, never, don't, if you don't have something good to say, don't say anything. And I wish, that when people are making comments, that they recognize that maybe their comments are coming from a place of lack of knowledge.
Ignorance.
They
can mute themselves, right? And there's a lot of muted people.
Yes, exactly. So, but I mean that, right? Because how can you make so many comments about other people when you've never lived their lives?
Or talk to them.
Or exactly, or at least talk to them.
Right.
What we really need is, could we have opportunities where people have open dialogue, but in a very respectful way?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you have to hope, if you do that, you hope that people will come away from that more enlightened.
Right. But it's the fear that people have been
exactly
that people have been told that they have to have about people who look different from them. Right. I think about all the people. I mean, I grew up pretty much in a space where I had some luxuries. Right. Didn't have all of them. I'm gonna be very honest about that. But I got an opportunity to go to a college, and I lived in a residence hall. I lived around a whole lot of white individuals who accepted me for who I was, right? My roommate in college was, still one of my best friends to today. And so, but they allowed me in. They communicated, right? And they said, oh, maybe those lessons that I learned, or those things that someone told me, my caregiver who I loved told me something that was a falsehood. And I see the promise, and I see the friendships that I can have with people who look different from me and love differently.
Education changes everything.
Yeah.
Right. And I agree with you, Kent, that the best thing that we could have is for people to have the opportunity to interact with each other and take advantage of when you see those opportunities on our campus where you can interact with people that you may never have had the opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
And you think and understand the beauty that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
How fortunate we are that we could actually have that opportunity, right? I'm like you talked about going internationally and being fascinated by cultures. I am too. I'm just so fascinated by it, and I'm fascinated because I always think about, what type of impact does that have on that person? But we have the same opportunity here, right? Is that, yeah, like you said this earlier, there's so many people here who've had a different experience that we could learn from. Yeah. And that we could then, and the more we get to know people and understand that, the better it is for all of us. We come away much more open-minded, much more aware, yeah, of how much people have that you can value and that you can love. I think that's what this is about. Wow.
So listen, I'm going to give you an opportunity. It's like 3 minutes before the before the hour is up, and I'm enjoying this. This is the very first podcast coming out of ODI. Any last words that you want to share with the folks who are online right now?
I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank them for listening, and the fact that they're here. I know what it means is that probably many of you are committed to the same things we are. Right? Is that what we want is to create that inclusive environment where we all feel celebrated, right? And that we know we can continue to make changes in people's lives and have an impact. And we're here for our students, we're here for each other. And the more we can do that, the better. And know that, when I'm always fascinated by everybody that I meet. I don't know why, but I really am. I'm always trying to understand, what it is that they're thinking about. How can they, what are they working on? How are they contributing? How can I know more about what they're doing? It's that inquisitiveness that I hope never goes away for any of us. And I think that's part of being inclusive, right? Is that when I see that environment, I see just so much opportunity, so much potential that I want us to do even more together and be, just be there for each other and recognize the amazing people that we have around us and how blessed we are because we have them.
Blessed. I appreciate you so much. I am so happy that you were my first guest. When I asked you, you smiled and said, yes, you would do it. And so I'm happy for that. So with that, I'm going to close out, and I'm going to say, if you're interested in being a guest, we will have a Qualtrics form on our ODI website for those members of the university community that wish to join me. Our next few shows on Friday at 1:00, I'm going to be speaking with SGA leadership, President Sabrina LaRosa and Vice President Stephanie Blanco. I'm excited that will follow with next Wednesday. A very good friend of mine, a mentor of mine, Naomi Tutu, is going to be our guest. Naomi is the daughter of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, a world-renowned leader, and she has an incredible life story herself, and she stands on her own merits. And so I want you all to come out and hear her story as well. Lastly, on next Friday, the 30th, right before the political things go off the rails, maybe, we have student political party organizations going to have an opportunity to have a conversation with them. So the leaders of the Democratic Student Organization and the Republican Student Organization are going to come here and talk with me on next Friday, just to discuss the future of America. So lastly, thanks for joining me today. Please be on the lookout for other exciting programming happening this week, this Diversity Week for us. And I wish you all a very phenomenal rest of your days. Thank you for being part of us today. I appreciate you.